Are you a leader, manager, entrepreneur, business owner, or knowledge worker? Are you leading people or wondering how to be a better leader in your own life and work? If you are, then you can be experimenting better. Welcome to The Experimental Leader, a podcast that takes a look at the ways leaders are experimenting in their own work. Hosted by Melanie Parrish, we dive into real-life conversations about how people might be using a scientist's mindset and experimenting in their work. Shift your leadership into something that works better. Join us on The Experimental Leader today.
Hey, it's really great to be here live with you today. I'm Melanie Parrish, and I have been thinking about my own life, my own leadership, and I had a conversation with a really great coach today who asked me the question, who do you want to become, or what do you want to become? And I'm enamored with this question because the first things that I was like, really that popped into my head were like all the things I didn't want to become. Like I didn't want to be boring. I didn't want to be unfit. I didn't want to be mean. I didn't want to be, so there were all these didn't want to be's. And then as I started to think about it a little longer, I started to think of the things that I really like about myself and I want to continue. So, I feel like I'm pretty generous and I want to be that. I want to be abundant. I want to be kind and compassionate. And then I started to realize I want to become somebody who's better at having hard conversations with collaborators, like to not resolve conflict, like one layer down from that, when you just don't know, how to do it with somebody. And instead of getting scared, I want to be just really skilled. And so I want to become more of that. But then there were these overarching, like legacy kind of questions that came up. And I realized I get nihilistic really fast. Like life has no meaning and it all comes down to joy for me. It's all about like joy in the moment. And then how can I help other people have more joy in the moment? And like, I felt like I had a really big canvas when that was there. And I think I might need more challenge in there. But I thought I would share that question with you. Who or what do you want to become? And why? And so that's sort of my question for the week for you. And I am super excited about our guest today. Today, I am welcoming business owner, leadership strategist, facilitator, executive coach, author, and team energizer, Todd Long. Todd is passionate about helping people become more confident and mindful leaders. And he has a brand new book just coming out, which I am so excited about, called Performance Leadership, Inspiring Growth in Others. And I am so excited to have him on our show today. So welcome, Todd.
Thank you, Melanie. I appreciate the introduction. And I love your question that you posed to the audience. I was processing that. I was waiting to come on and thinking about what my response to that would be. And what I loved is at the very end of it, you said joy. And that's really been stirring in me lately, like this whole notion of how do we live a life of joy in everything that we're doing and everything that who we are and the people we get to interact with. And so when you said that joy, it really resonated with me because that's something I've been focusing on lately and thinking about and processing, and how does that manifest itself in our lives. So very cool question. Lots to explore there.
That's nice. And you're like becoming an author. I don't know if you have another book out already, but like as your book comes out, you become sort of a published author, which is a cool becoming as well. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's quite the journey to write a book, which I know we were talking about. You've written a book as well and gone through that process. And so, yes, this is number one, the first book. Hopefully there'll be another one at some point. We'll see. We'll walk through this process, but it's been, I think the process of writing a book is something that stirs in you. At least for me, it stirred in me probably 20 years ago. The notion and ideas and thoughts that kind of accumulated over the years to then get themselves to a point where I felt compelled to put them on paper, and then felt compelled to then kind of edit that and work through that process and put it out there to the world. And my hope is that it's valuable, right? I think that was kind of my underlying motivation finally in writing this is, can I write something that will be worthwhile for people and really find value in it and help them, particularly in the area of leadership development.
And if you distill it down, to the essence, like what's the thing? If there was like one sentence, I know you probably have, more than a few pages about this topic, but like, what's the thing you want people to leave with at the end? Like the couple of sentences that's the most important thing that people would walk away with from your book.
Yeah, no, great. I would say I, as a leader, have more confidence in helping people go through the learning process. And I'd say that probably puts it in a nutshell. How can I have the confidence to help people move through the phases of learning, the growth phases, as I call them, and feel better about myself and be able to do that well? Because that's an area in every business, every walk of life, every role we have almost, that we have the opportunity to help people grow and develop and get better if we're willing to do that. And then I know that a lot of particularly young managers, they get this responsibility of like, I got this team and now it's my responsibility to make sure that people on my team actually know how to do their jobs really well. And yet I know how to do the job really well, but do I know how to transfer those skills or help somebody else do the job really well? And they find themselves lost in trying to figure that out and navigating that. And so that's the bottom line, is to help people get the skills to be able to do that, help
Well,
people move through this learning well.
and I think in leadership, I had a client who was in finance and she was like, okay, so I spent 4 years in undergrad and then I spent 2 years getting my MBA. And then I worked as an accountant for 3 years. And then I got promoted into leadership with no learning, no skill, no way to get those things. And all of a sudden I was supposed to be successful and I wasn't. And so I think this happens all the time in leadership, that somebody's a subject matter expert and all of a sudden they're supposed to be an expert in leadership and they don't know how.
Yeah, no, I find that as well. People get promoted up because they're really good performers and they do a great job and they're valuable, and then they see some potential and they see the opportunity to take on this responsibility. There's maybe a little ego in that as far as, oh wow, I get to be in this role. And then it's like, wait a minute, how do I actually do this well? And there's so many skills, as you know, I mean, there's so many sets of skills that it takes to be able to lead a group of people well.
What do you think some of those skills are? Like, I love these conversations.
No, I think that's great. Oh my gosh. I think, well, I'll give you I'll call it the VIPs. So the VIPs is my little acronym for this. So I think probably every leadership book you read, there's about vision. How do we create and craft a narrative that says, here's the future state that we're going towards, and the skill set to be able to think about that, one, and then two, be able to craft that in a message that people are like, yeah, that sounds compelling. And it can't be too far reaching, right? The vision can't be too big that's like, it's ridiculous, we're not going to get there. But it can't be too small that people are like, that's too easy. And so being able to find that the skill sets of being able to craft that vision. So that's the V, I would say. Then the I is the involve. How do you draw people in and connect with them in terms of the relational connection, and also understanding what their strengths and gifts and talents are, and then what their motivations are, and drawing them into the team, into the experience, into the work, so they're seen as valuable and you see them as valuable, and then you can engage them in what's happening. So I'd say that's the I. So it's the V, there's the I. And then the P is the people development. So that's the book, right? Performance leadership is really fully around how do you inspire growth in others, and how do you grow and develop the people around you, both in the technical skills they have to do, but there's also skills in terms of soft skills and interpersonal skills and skills that just navigating companies or relationships and all those things that take place. So vision, involve, people development. You got to have the acrostic, right, as a leadership development person. and then the last thing I'd say, just like think about strategy. And so you think about, how do we strategically arrange things and think about things and put them in order so that we can actually get to that vision as well. And all that, I would say, is not like, it's not independent. I think that's the mistake many leaders make, is like, well, I got to be the one that has the vision. I got to be the one that does all the involving. I got to be the one that does everything. Well, that's not true. You actually, I would say, as a leader, we have to engage the interests of others, and how do you draw them in and get their voice, so I don't have to craft the vision by myself. I can invite other people into that crafting process and think about that and creating of that. And I can involve people in the people development side. It's like, hey, I have to have a relationship with you to help you understand where you're trying to go in order to help you develop those skills. And so that comes to mind. Yeah. So anyway, those
Well,
things that pop in my head.
Well, and I'm really curious. Like I know we all talk about growth. We want to, the title, the words that are in your title, like everybody wants performance, everybody wants leadership, everybody wants to be inspiring, everybody wants
Right.
growth. Like, if I'm a new leader, how do I start to make sense of all those words?
Yeah. Well, I'll use it from this framework. All right. So from the performance leadership framework, the way I make sense of that is, first of all, we have to recognize where people are in, I call them these growth phases. And so I've put language to where people might be, whatever skill they're learning and developing. So there's these 4 phases. One is the consideration phase. And number 2 is the practice phase. And number 3 is the self-sufficient phase. And then we get to the excel phase. So there's these phases we go through in anything and everything that we want to learn. And so just having language to help someone understand what phase you're in can help also then set expectations and begin to think about, okay, what do you need now to take that next step through these growth phases? And so whether it's, I picked up the ukulele a few years ago with my oldest daughter, and we started playing around with the ukulele. And so we sat around and we thought about, do I want to learn how to play the ukulele? So we considered that, right? And then I went and bought the $80 ukulele because I wasn't going to buy the $15 one because that wasn't going to work very well. I was going to get something that was decent. And then we started practicing, watching YouTube videos and talking to other people and strumming along and figuring out techniques. And finally we got to the point where we can actually play the ukulele a little bit and sing a little song around it. I'm not the excel phase in the ukulele world yet, or ukulele, if you want to pronounce it probably correctly in that word. So, but you take that, whether it's the ukulele or you take that in terms of creating a database or computer programming or running a new software system that does your finances for your business, whatever you're trying to learn, we're all in different phases in our growth process. So one is just giving language to where we're at in that process with a given task. All right. And then we have to be careful because no person is great at everything. Our goal and our job is to be really efficient and really good at each of these tasks. But we're not great at everything. So we have to recognize where we're continuing to grow in that specific task.
And I mean, this is an interesting question, I think, from a point of view of, people have strengths and weaknesses. Are you a focus on your strengths or focus on your weaknesses or focus on both? Like, where do you fall in all of that?
Yeah, I'll lean into the strength side of things. That's where I would lean into that in terms of recognizing what are the natural talents and gifts that you have. What are your natural kind of what are you drawn towards and want to do and can be most productive in that? So I would lean into that side and try to help people develop that. Now, I also get there's a realistic aspect in certain people's lives. It's like, I need a job, I need to make money, and I need to provide for my family. And so I'm just gonna go do the job, right? So I may not be fully manifesting everything I love to do right now, but I just got to go do the job and get it done.
Well, and I'm noticing there's a whole set of strengths that every leader needs. Like, you can't think, I'm not very good with people, so I just don't do that.
Right,
like
right.
there's actually more in the leadership than in the technical skill. Like, there's literally skills, like I don't think you can walk away from empathy because you're not good at it. Like, I think you have to, even if it's not your strength, I think you have to double down and figure it out. Like, how will you appear empathetic if you don't feel it?
Right.
Because people need that.
Yeah. Well, and then I think about that because I love you said that, because I think about, I've heard you for leadership talk about what are the derailers, what are the things in your skill set. If you don't have them, man, you're just going to go off the tracks, and it's not going to be one. You're not going to be as effective, and that might be one of them. Empathy, or even the ability to communicate a clear message as a leader. Like, if I don't have that skill set to communicate a clear message to my team, then I'm going to flounder, and it's going to be really difficult, whether it's a written message or a verbal message, and I need to work on that. Now, what I'm curious about is, and this is where I've tried to reframe sometimes strengths, is like, what are your strengths that might help you be more empathetic? All right. So if I can look around me and maybe I'm curious, maybe I have a strength of curiosity. Well, if I can take that strength of curiosity and then weave it into the idea of empathy, well, maybe then I can start moving myself a little bit towards empathy as well. Or if I
And it's interesting, like, some of the rules in HR give you guidelines for empathy. Like, I had a conversation with somebody, and they had an employee on short-term disability. And they were like, I need to reach out and find out what the plan is. And I was like, they're on short-term disability. What do maybe you want to wait till they get to long-term disability and then you can naturally reach out to them, but maybe they don't know the plan on short-term disability. And it was interesting to just sort of think about I think we have a lot of people out right now in the world on disability of some kind, because I think people got really burned out during COVID. And I'm just really noticing this with my clients. And I think we want certainty. So we want to know when they will return. But the fact that they're out on some kind of mental health or disability of some kind, they may not know. I mean, and so pressing them for certainty because it's uncomfortable, that's that's part of the job of the leader to grapple with. She was like, my client was like, but I'm stressed too. Like,
yeah. So what I heard in that is that you've got an employee that she wants to be empathetic with, but she can't because the barriers of the HR law says I can't reach out, have that conversation to be empathetic. But also what I hear in that situation is the strain of like, I'm down a person and I need to make plans and figure out when that person's coming back, or how do I navigate my workforce here with one person gone, and I don't know when they're coming back.
No, I think there's some real complexity around that right now, like in a way that I haven't ever seen it happening so many places at the same time. So, whereas one person might be, out on disability at a time, now we have multiple people, and like our structures and it puts more stress, and like it's almost, it almost spins up the whole thing more because people take on more work.
Yeah. Well, then you go back to that. Like, I'm going to weave that back into kind of just learning, the process of learning, experimenting. So if I've got a staff of 4 and I know how that staff functions, I know they all know their responsibilities and their roles, and they're working pretty efficiently, and one goes out, right? You lose one for whatever reason, you're down to 3.
Yep.
Now I have to relearn, how does this group of 3 do or close to the same work as group of 4, and you have to relearn as a group to go, wait a minute, we've just moved ourselves back into the learning process of managing ourselves and learning how to do all our tasks together with 3 people versus 4 people. Or me as a leader, I have to learn how to function with 3 versus 4 and have to reset expectations around that and understand what that might look like. So,
well, and when I work with teams or any, group of more than one, we look at the system, and that I call it a third entity. It's out of my organization and relationship systems coaching, but we call it a third entity, and that third entity has a need. But as soon as you remove a person, your third entity is different. And so everybody has to get their feet for a minute, which I'm saying exactly what you're saying, just with different language. But it is interesting that the entity itself changes. So when we feel that whiplash of, hey, it feels like a whole new team today. We got to start. Why are we starting from scratch? We've been doing this for years. Well, we're doing from scratch because that person filled roles. They filled gaps. They did things naturally on the team. Like, they may have been the one that ordered the coffee or something. Like, things can just fall up. And so it can be really it can be a little bit crazy making when we lose a team member. And if we lose and if we lose them sequentially, then it can really throw a team for a much longer time period than one would think.
100%. Well, and there's the emotional state of that too, that I think oftentimes, back to the point of empathy, like there's an emotional condition that's happening here. Whatever took that team member away, there's an emotional response both from the leader and the other team members in that moment. And recognizing and being able to process those emotions a little bit so we can kind of settle those down and then be able to move forward. Because if we're just stuck in this emotional state of like, oh, I've lost a team member and this is really horrible and terrible, and all I'm thinking about is how horrible and terrible it is, and I have all these restraining emotions, then I won't be able to move past that and get to the point where, okay, wait a minute, let's find a way to move through this anyway and settle ourselves down and figure this out. So, but I think we have to acknowledge that emotional condition, which is important. That's an important aspect of learning. We don't acknowledge the emotional condition, then we're missing a key point in terms of our own team development, our own individual development. Plays out.
Well, and what I'm noticing is the way that you use language is you're talking about learning in any emergent thing that is happening, rather than, hey, I'm going to take a course and I'm going to skill up and I'm identifying something. But you're actually talking about learning and growth happening sort of in real time.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's where we probably get our most valuable learning is in the
Yeah.
real experience. Now, the class, the workshop, the podcast, these kinds of experiences where we learn, we get some knowledge, we're thinking about it and processing prepares us a little bit for the moment, but nothing prepares us more than, the moment that it happens and you're like, wait a minute, now I have to change how I'm leading or do something differently to make this happen.
I did hear once that well, I heard it more than once. I knew somebody who used to say, education is what you get when you didn't get what you wanted. And, that just popped into my brain right now.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, it compels me to think of a kind of a huge moment in my career. This is several years ago. I ran an outdoor ropes course or challenge course. I don't know if you're familiar with that industry, but basically we bring youth and adults out. We, take them through different experiences to help them grow as a team and leader. Well, the location we had was this huge giant course with high course structures and low course structures. Well, a tornado happened to come through and destroy the course. I mean, literally an F4 tornado came right through the middle of our the campus location we were at. Happened to be in at the time. I won't go into that details, but it literally like here's the business I'm running gets destroyed.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, what do I do now? Well, and the emotional strain of that, and I was like, wow, it rocked my world, in so many ways. And then I had to kind of settle in and reassess what are the resources we have, what are the people we have, what our clients need, and how can we readjust to keep this thing going and make it even better than it was before. And but it's still, those tornadoes come through, whether they're literal tornadoes or whether they're other tornadoes, they will come through and they're going to happen in your business. And
what do you think is important when a tornado comes through, metaphorically or real?
Yeah. No, I think most important is, and this is probably where I've had to learn as a leader, is I have a tendency to just kind of bypass the emotional condition. I have to pause and go, you know what? This is hard. This is difficult. I'm upset. I'm angry about this. I might be sad about this. I have to be able to process that a little bit in a safe place with the right people. And I might then have to help the other people around me process that a little bit as well. And think to it. Now, I think there's always this place you got to be careful with that recognize emotional conditions, so you don't go into a rabbit hole and you're just stuck down in the pit, right? But there's some healthy processing that. So that to me is important. Then also, I think just to pause and assess what are the actual resources I have to fix this problem, and then begin to go, okay. Like in the challenge group, my world with the ropes course getting blown over, it's like, well, I have insurance money. Okay, that's cool. I have a great staff. Yeah, that's really helpful. I have a great staff. I have the company that built the challenge course originally. So I started looking around. You start to go, what are the resources I have when the tornado comes through, and then how can I use those resources? And then the third thing that comes to my mind is I think about what's actually in my control, what's outside of my control. So if we can just do an assessment, okay, these are the things I can actually have influence on, and all this stuff out here, I gotta let go of it. Even though I want something to change out there, I gotta be able to let go of all that and be able to go, okay, what can I actually influence at this time in this moment with the resources I have, recognizing the condition that we're in.
It's so interesting. I mean, we're talking about a tornado, but my husband's aunt and uncle actually had their house burned down.
Oh man.
In Oregon in the wildfires a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And they have rebuilt on the same land and they're almost done. And their house is really beautiful. And they've been posting pictures of the old house and the new house. And the new house looks stunning. It's like, because their other house did additions and things like that. The new house is planned and, beautiful. But my question was, are they okay? Like, I don't know if they're okay. And they did so many cool things. Like they took the china the pieces of china they found and made like stones for the garden out of them. Like they did just these amazing things. And I think they're okay. Yeah. But it's like that emotional piece. In this moment, I'm just absorbing how important that are we okay? What do we need? Process piece is, because you can rebuild almost everything. It's just what the loss is on that journey. Yeah. And I just am curious about what that is for every organization, about every, big change that comes, how do we be okay at the end of it?
Well, it's interesting too. What I heard in that story is they use pieces from the old to build into the new as a memorial. Like we can't forget like all the memories of that house, all the things that happened in that environment with those things. And yet sometimes it takes these kinds of things that happen in our lives to create something new, push us forward, and have something out there. And I'm sure everybody responds differently in that. How they manage that. But that sounds similar to the story with the challenge course. Like we got this brand new challenge course. Like the end of the rainbow story is like, wow, we got to practice. I got to practice with one course for 3 years. It got destroyed. And I go, what can I do differently to make this even better? So we actually built a much more robust course that actually drove the business that made it even better. And so that was part of that experience. So I think there's oftentimes, even in our worlds, when things get kind of destroyed or knocked down, it's like, hey, how can we rebuild, relearn, regrow, and see what the beautiful thing is at the other end of it, and the hope for that, right?
Yeah. Where can people find you, Todd?
Great question. So www.leadkc is my website. So LEAD and letter KC.com is my website. So you can check that out. There's also so I have a separate website for the book. So it's P4 Leader. So P4leader.com is the website for that. You can find out information about the performance leadership book there, and the workshops and other things that are connected to that performance leadership. LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out there as well. Happy to connect with people in that environment also. So
that's just great. And it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Melanie.
Well, that was a really fun conversation. And one of the biggest takeaways for me for this conversation is that it's such an interesting idea to think about the fact that the vision doesn't have to come just from the leader. We can have these conversations that develop our vision. Vision can come from everywhere in the organization. We can throw out drafts and we can get feedback, or we can actually engage people in a preliminary conversation about vision. We don't have to decide on our own. I hope that you have some really interesting vision conversations as you include the people in your organizations into the visions that you're creating, and go experiment.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of The Experimental Leader. We hope you have found value in today's episode, because we're dedicated to helping you become the experimental leader you want to be. To access the show notes or learn more about working with Melanie, visit melanieparish.com. Go experiment.